What in the hell is this? The chairman tweets, "Protect our ducks and kittens in Ohio," because he goes down some crazy rabbit hole, completely debunked that aliens are eating pets. My God, are you okay, Mr. Chairman? Because last year, for a very long time, you tweeted and promoted Kanye West as he was calling for genocide against the Jews, and you kept it up. And now, when we have victims coming here, you're tweeting this nonsense. I don't know why you would do this. I hope you're okay. I don't know if the aliens who are eating your ducks are in the room with us right now, but Mr. Chairman, this is a serious issue. These people have loved ones who have been lost, and you tweeted this.
And you raised this in your testimony, Mr. Fahey. The opportunity cost, when Alvin Bragg did the day one memo, says we are not going to charge all these felonies, we're going to bring them down to misdemeanors and let the bad guys roam the streets of New York. How that squares with what happened here, that to me is the real issue. That's the issue that most Americans see, like, we're going to do this to the former president of the United States, meanwhile, take felony charges against really bad guys on the street and bring them down to misdemeanors. That's the opportunity cost here, I believe, in Manhattan. You get the last word, Mr. Fahey.
Yeah, exactly. When you're letting carjackers out on bail or illegal immigrants that assault police officers aren't getting prosecuted, but this is the way you're using your time, in addition to the fact you run on a soft on crime policy and then you take the most creative, aggressive approach to this crime, it's hard to argue it's anything other than a political motivation.
Okay, I got a lot of ground to cover. I do want to clarify, Mr. Fahey, when you consistently talk about or New York crime, you're speaking in an opinionated stance. You're not speaking from a place of fact, correct?
No, I'm speaking from a place of facts.
Okay, well, let me clarify for you. Thank you so much. I'm reclaiming my time. Let me clarify for you that NYPD puts out reports. And in April, it said overall index crime across New York City dropped another 4.9%. As it relates to May, the report says overall index crime across New York dropped another 2.4%, and June's report hasn't come out. I would ask for unanimous consent to enter this into the record.
Special Counsel Robert Hur stated on page 1 of his report, quote, "Our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. Joe Biden not only kept information he wasn't allowed to keep, he shared it with people who weren't allowed to see it. To date, Attorney General Garland has failed to produce the audio tapes. To determine whether Special Counsel Hur appropriately carried out justice by not prosecuting, not recommending for prosecution the president, the recordings are necessary. The transcripts alone are not sufficient evidence of the state of the president's memory. Frankly, because the White House has a track record of altering the transcripts. The department has a legal obligation to turn over the requested materials pursuant to the subpoena. Attorney General Garland's willful refusal to comply with our subpoena constitutes contempt of Congress.
It is a height of hypocrisy for the chairman of this committee to try to enforce a contempt subpoena against Merrick Garland when this chairman himself ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena. Now, I've been to a number of proceedings in my time in Congress and in the state legislature that have been relatively stupid. But this proceeding goes beyond stupidity. It is a waste of taxpayer resources. Why is that? Because we have the transcript. We have the transcript of the interview between Special Counsel Robert Hur and President Biden. There's no evidence whatsoever that this transcript was made up, that it's fake, that it's been doctored. This transcript was produced by Robert Hur's office. Robert Hur was appointed by Donald Trump. He is a Republican appointee. The notion that somehow this transcript is fake is a wild, insane conspiracy theory.
Some might call this all election interference. Think about it. Mr. Bragg is charging President Trump with conspiracy to impact the 2016 election. Ms. Willis and Mr. Smith are charging President Trump with a conspiracy to interfere with the 2020 election. Seems to me the conspiracy is between Bragg, Smith, and Willis working to interfere with the 2024 race.
The Mar-a-Lago case is plagued with singular moments where prosecutors took incredibly aggressive and I would say prejudicial steps, the likes of which I had never seen in 35 years of practice on both sides of the aisle.
The Biden administration, and most notably the Department of Justice, appears to have embarked on a journey of political persecution of those with whom it disagrees, with the end result being the total social, economic, and political domination of the populace.
I've been up here for 24 years. I was a soldier when Nixon was president. I am appalled that what began with Watergate as a legitimate scandal of the wrongdoing has now become an organized weaponization by this president and his Department of Justice. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
This was a specific and obvious tactic of Donald Trump to be able to make a political defense that will never be allowed in a court of law, as Mr. Trusty and Mr. Costello know full well. And all because he wanted to co-opt this notion of election interference because he's a candidate. But let me tell you what is really election interference. Withholding military aid to an ally in the middle of a war in order to coerce and extort a foreign government to investigate a political opponent. Welcoming a foreign country to illegally interfere in our election and then using that interference for his own benefit, as Donald Trump did with Russia in 2016. Spend a year and a half on a completely bogus impeachment investigation into the president without finding a single piece of evidence of wrongdoing. And in fact, the chairman of this committee said the best evidence of President Biden's wrongdoing was a completely false accusation planted by Russia just before the 2020 election. Interesting timing.
I'm here for a celebration because, let's raise a glass. It's been about 2 years this week. May 12 is when Jim Jordan, our chairman, was subpoenaed and asked to comply with his subpoena for his role, his interaction with the former president on the January 6th attack of the Capitol. And so we are now 735 days in. It's 2 years, and this committee has the nerve, this committee has the temerity to seek compliance from the Attorney General. I actually think you should not be able to bring any subpoena of another person if you are out of compliance of your own subpoena. That seems to make a lot of sense to me, and we'll have an amendment to address that a little bit later. This is about doing everything to help Donald Trump, who you see as your client, who a New York criminal trial sees as a defendant, to help him win an election. So I have no interest in playing this game. The American people have no interest in playing this game. And all this does, for those of you who have graced us with your presence, animates that it's a completely do-nothing Congress.
Now, moving on, I just want to level set because I feel as if some people don't understand how government works, and I don't know how they got to Congress. So, Mr. Wu, I'm gonna need you to help me out because I don't know that I trust that other people will know the answers to these questions. Number one, how many branches of government do we have?
3.
3, okay, sounds good. So, can you name them for me?
Legislative, judiciary, and executive.
Very good. Okay, so currently, I think that I serve in the legislative branch. Would you agree?
I agree.
Okay, fine. Can you tell me when somebody goes to court, such as a criminal convicted of 34 felony counts, state court in New York, would that be the legislative people or judicial people?
Well, it's really the executive that's prosecuting, and then it's within the judiciary to run the trial properly.
Okay, very good. So, judiciary. So, typically, if someone has an issue with, say, what happens in court, do they then somehow hop from state court all the way to the federal legislative branch, or is there a different process in which you are supposed to be able to explain any issues you may have?
process would be the judicial appellate process, holding aside the issue of state versus federal.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. So normally people don't get convicted on a state level and somehow end up litigating the issue on the federal level in the legislative branch. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So something is different about what's going on today. I just wanted to clarify because I thought I was living in the upside down for a second. Now, I want to move on and talk about how someone is prosecuted currently, because under Project 2025, we'll get there. There will be a different way to prosecute people. But currently, it is my understanding, and I only kind of went to law school, passed a couple of bar exams, and practiced on the state and federal levels. But just clarify for me, when someone goes in to be prosecuted, is it, say, the President of the United States that somehow becomes the state prosecutor in New York?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not, because he's the executor, huh? That's that other branch.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so you have this prosecutor, and in this case, it's Alvin Bragg, who was duly elected, correct?
Correct.
Not appointed by the president, correct?
Right.
Duly elected by the citizens in his jurisdiction, right?
Right.
So he's elected, and usually there's some sort of an investigation that takes place, correct?
Prior to his election? Or?
No. With a case, I'm sorry.
Yes,
I've
correct.
moved on.
Yes.
All right. So the very first part of a case is that we go through an investigation. After that investigation, then the prosecutor usually has what we would consider to be some sort of prosecutorial discretion as to whether or not they want to go forward, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then they use that discretion, but then when it's somebody that is facing a felony amount of time, which is usually in most states over a year, then they have to present it to a grand jury. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, a grand jury is comprised of citizens, correct?
Correct.
U.S. citizens from that area, correct?
Right.
Okay, so they have to come to the conclusion that they are going to issue what we call a true bill, correct?
Correct.
All right, so then we have an indictment. And then there's pretrial motions, there's pretrial hearings, all kinds of stuff, right?
Right.
All right, and then ultimately, depending on where you are, you have the opportunity to say, hey, I want a jury trial, correct?
Correct.
And a jury trial is comprised of U.S. citizens again, right?
Right.
Okay, very good. All right, so can you tell me so far if all of this took place in the case in New York?
Yes, it did.
Oh, okay. All right, so you get to trial. Now, when you show up to trial and you're facing a felony amount of time, as a defendant, are you not entitled to an attorney?
Yes, you are.
And your attorney is allowed to pick the jury, they're allowed to present evidence, and ultimately, it is a jury of your peers who decides whether or not you are guilty or not, correct?
Correct.
And in this case,
the picking has the judge involved too.
And in this case, they found him guilty not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4, not 5, not 6. I could keep going on, but 34 counts were given. So the opinions of these people who were not juries is not what we do in this country. In this country, we have a system in which jurors decide who is found guilty, and if you have a problem with that, you go to the appellate court, which the last time I checked, he was raising money so that he could go to the appellate court and appeal his decision, and they will have the final say so. Thank you so much.
Gentleman from California is recognized. Oh, we'll go down the line. I'll do whatever you. Swalwell, okay.
I'm sorry to each of you for the circumstances that have brought you here. I'm truly sorry that this has happened to your loved ones. And the persons responsible for the deaths of Weston, Arlene, Rachel, Kayla, and Jocelyn should die in jail and then rot in hell. That's what they deserve. I believe in security. I want barriers on our southern border at every place it makes sense. I don't want anyone to come into our country if we don't know who they are. I was a prosecutor. I'm probably one of the only persons in this room who's actually prosecuted and put away for the rest of their life some of the most violent people in our community. I'm the son of a cop. My brothers are cops. The 2 of them walk the beat every single day. I believe we can have security first and also address a workforce crisis and find a pathway to earned citizenship in our country. But I want to be real with you. Congress is divided. and it's hard to get everything you want. On gun violence, I want an assault weapons ban and background checks. We have a divided Congress, and so we had to settle for Republicans and Democrats coming together for the Safer Communities Act. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And fewer kids will die in their classrooms today because Congress compromised. I want to be real with you. They don't want a compromise. Donald Trump walked away from the second most conservative Republican in the Senate offering a compromise. Don't take my word for it. Take theirs.
The border is a very important issue for Donald Trump, and the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
But I would acknowledge President Trump failed, along with Republicans. They failed in 2018 to actually move a border security bill to tighten this so that we weren't dealing with this crisis right now.
We all felt that border was a complete disaster, myself included. First, there was an effort to make law, which requires you to deal with Democrats. And then a number of our members thought it wasn't good enough. And then our nominee for president didn't seem to want us to do anything at all.
It's your colleagues in your party, sir, who torpedoed this, who didn't get the facts right on what you just outlined was in that measure. They killed it. Ironically, not Democrats.
Right.
Each of you came here today, not easily, but you expected a serious forum. You are serious. This issue is serious. They are not serious. The chairman yesterday tweeted, are the aliens, the chairman yesterday tweeted, when President Trump was in office, the border was secure and illegal aliens weren't eating your pets. He also then tweeted, again, knowing that you're gonna come here to talk about your loved ones who were lost, you would expect some seriousness, some gravitas, respect for the people who came here. What in the hell is this? I am sorry that you came here expecting seriousness. You are serious. They are not, and you deserve a hell of a lot more than what you're getting from them. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
If Republicans are going to go low, I am going to punch back. So let's talk about Donald Trump. I agree with the Republican from New Jersey who said if a person cannot stand trial, he should not be president of the United States. Donald Trump has fallen asleep multiple times at his own criminal trial. I am a former prosecutor. I can tell you that is not normal. I think there may be some physical and mental health issues that should be investigated. I'm going to tell you what people in the courtroom are writing about Donald Trump falling asleep. Here's a reporter who has been observing this. One reporter observed, quote, that Donald Trump has nodded off a few times, his mouth going slack and his head drooping onto his chest, end quote. Another reporter said, quote, that Donald Trump slowly dropped his head. His eyes closed, it jerked back upward, he adjusts himself, then his head droops again, he straightens up, leaning back, his head droops for a third time, he shakes his shoulders, eyes closed still, his head drops, end quote. If a person is so weak and feeble, if Donald Trump is so weak and feeble, he cannot stay awake at his own criminal trial, he can't be president of the United States. So instead of going around trying to smear different people, why don't we work on a bipartisan basis on issues that matter to the American people? Like, how about let's do a bipartisan hearing and let's do some bills to fix our broken immigration system. But the Republicans here don't want to do that. They don't want to work on a bipartisan basis. They don't want to fix this. Why? Because Donald Trump told them not to. Well, okay, so how about another issue? Let's talk about high prices. Prices are high. We did get a good report yesterday that inflation has now slowed down. That is good, but prices are still high. Why don't we work on bipartisan basis to look at price gouging? We have companies making record profits, they're gouging consumers. Let's have a hearing on that. Why don't we have a hearing on that? Because Republicans don't want to fix this issue. They want it as a campaign issue. Okay, then how about let's do a topic that isn't a campaign issue. Artificial intelligence has now become prevalent in many places. It could have privacy implications. It could do amazing things. It could also harm us in a variety of ways in terms of bias and so on. Why don't we do a hearing on this in this committee? Why don't we do that? Instead, we're here doing this stupid stuff to try to get audio of a transcript we already have. And it gets even worse than that. There is a second committee. The Oversight Committee is going to do an exact same hearing on this contempt proceeding. Let me just put in that, you know what, at least the chairman of that committee did not ignore a congressional bipartisan subpoena. It might be more appropriate for that committee to do it, and we should end this proceeding right now. I yield back.
Election interference, huh? That's what this is all about. Ms. Weinbanks, there are 4 indictments against Donald Trump, is that right?
Correct.
And all 4 of those investigations started long before he announced his candidacy for president, isn't that right?
That is correct.
And in fact, he announced his candidacy for president 2 years before the election, just so he could bring in 3 witnesses and the entire Republican Party to say, election interference, election interference. These investigations long predated it. As usual, my Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle are accusing the Democrats of doing all of their misconduct that they engage in over and over and over in an effort to normalize it, in an effort to deflect attention from their own wrongdoing. It is right in authoritarian 101 playbook. But let's talk about this 2-tiered system of justice. Let's talk about lawfare. Mr. Costello, your entire opening statement, as I heard it, was simply to discredit Michael Cohen. Sir, I think you're in the wrong place. Michael Cohen is currently on the witness stand at a trial in Manhattan. And if you have information about Michael Cohen's testimony, you should talk to Donald Trump and his lawyers to see if they want to call you as a witness to impeach Michael Cohen. But you know that coming down here, outside of that courtroom, while that witness is on the stand to try to impeach his credibility and his testimony, is jury tampering. You know it is unethical. You know that you are trying to discredit a current witness at a current trial who is testifying right now outside of that courtroom. You know better, and it is shameful. Mr. Trustee, you and I worked together at the Department of Justice. We had a number of interactions related to organized crime. I had no idea what your politics were. I imagine you had no idea what my politics were, because it doesn't matter. And it's very interesting to hear you now nitpick about the Speedy Trial Act and about what you claim to be unprecedented conduct in Mar-a-Lago. But I'm confident that you never came across anyone who refused a request to voluntarily return classified materials, who refused to comply with a subpoena for those classified materials, who was found to intentionally conceal and hide and obstruct justice by concealing those classified documents. You've never come across, that is unprecedented, I am certain, because that is a clear predicate for a search warrant. When someone obstructs justice, refuses to comply with the subpoena, and Mr. Issa can make up all of the facts that he wants about declaring it to be classified because he thought it or whatever it is, that will be decided in court. All of these cases will be decided in court by a jury based on the facts, evidence, and the law. And all the Republican majority is trying to do here today is lawfare, is interfere in ongoing criminal investigations that our system is perfectly well equipped to handle. And I yield back.
It's nice to see that some of my colleagues on the other side can make it today. I don't know if that means that there weren't enough seats in the courtroom in New York But I know that the Oversight Committee canceled a hearing that was supposed to happen right now on this matter so that they could be at the president's trial. I know some members will miss this vote because they want to be at the president's trial. And I don't think that anything could animate the phrase, "do nothing Congress," more than missing votes and canceling hearings to go up and be a spectator at your cult leader's trial. That is the definition of do nothing Congress. But I want to talk about this particular effort to hold the Attorney General in contempt, because what is this really about? After all, it was Donald Trump's appointed prosecutor who the Attorney General deputized to be the special counsel here to look at President Biden's handling of classified documents. So it was Donald Trump's prosecutor who cleared President Biden. He said, there's nothing to see here. And in fact, although he did not put it in the lead memo for his report, there was an exchange that he acknowledged in the interview with President Biden where the special counsel told the president, your recall is photographic. He didn't say your recall is good. He didn't say your recall is decent. The special counsel said, your recall is photographic. So what is this really about? This is about you all not accepting the outcome of the 2020 election. You rooted on the rioters as they sought to attack the Capitol on January 6th. If that wasn't enough, you all went back to the floor and relitigated the issues that brought the rioters to the Capitol just 8 hours later. Many of you go and visit the convicted criminals who assaulted the police officer at their jail cells. And during Police Week, as a bunch of officers yesterday testified in the Homeland Security hearing that those officers are heroes and those rioters are criminals, you call them hostages. And the former president calls them hostages. So this is entirely about not accepting the outcome of the January 6th vote here, rooting on the rioters, and doing everything you can to try and affect the outcome of the upcoming election. And so then I thought to myself, is there like a parallel? Is there another investigation where your side was completely incurious about what that investigation yielded? Turns out there was. Turns out it happened recently. Turns out somebody on your side was investigated for sex trafficking. Now you're going to say, well, he was cleared. He was cleared. They dropped the charges. Yes, the Biden Attorney General dropped the charges, didn't pursue, didn't bring charges. That's exactly what happened with President Biden. But you all have shown no interest to go to the Attorney General and say, well, we want to learn more. We want to see the notes and the audio recordings and the evidence of our own colleagues' sex trafficking investigation. Not a peep from any one of you. So if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to show just a little bit of consistency, I would be willing to entertain that you have a genuine interest in understanding what happened in that hearing. But that's not what this is about.